The final shape has finally arrived, and when I logged in on Tuesday, besides expecting to find a properly working game, I expected that Prismatic would be a fun smattering of elemental abilities that weren't really better than their subclass counterparts. And I was wrong, on both accounts.
Its many. Was that
Oh! Oh, and it's Weasel! While struggling through my solo legend campaign stream, I stumbled into a melee build. The best melee build I've used on Hunter in years. It instantly made my legend run so much easier. Although, it doesn't fix being stupid. If you find a solution for that, let me know. So we're going to take a closer look at what this build excels at, some of its weaknesses, and lastly, how this build can grow. As good as this build is now, there's one single change we'll be able to add later on that I think is going to break this build wide open. And don't worry, the core of this build is incredible, and it's also all part of the starter kit for Hunter Prismatic, so you don't have to grind a ton of stuff before you can use this build. Whether you've been playing for 72 hours straight, or you just bought Final Shape, you can still use it. Alright, so first up, this is a punchy build. The whole loop is just punch everything. Normally hunters leave that to titans, but sometimes I want to have fun, alright? That also means we're going to be in danger frequently. So for this build, we're going to have to focus on surviving, dealing enough damage to drop our enemies quickly, and then health regen to keep us in the game. Naturally, that means we're going to be using Liar's Handshake for our exotics, so we're getting extremely strong melees and health regen too. Really helps keep you alive. Very easy, very synergistic. Fun thing about Prismatic is that hunters also got Combination Blow, which increases your melee damage as you get kills, stacking up to 3 times, and it also returns some health as well. So we've got a great start there. Already a lot of damage going around. You got Liar's Handshake, Combination Blow. But see, old Arc, that's where the synergy died. You could add some mods, and those were okay, but Prismatic is just something else entirely. This Prismatic melee build compared to the same loop on Arc is kind of like when you tell a joke in a room and magically nobody hears you, and then someone makes the exact same joke and the room ignites with laughter.
That's my joke.
So what's so much better about Prismatic? Well, the first thing I noticed was the combination of Winter's Shroud with the constant dodging. Dodging and getting kills with Combination Blow will be perpetually recharging your dodge and melee energy, which means we're dodging a lot. Winter's Shroud is perfect for this because every time you dodge, you're going to release a slowing stasis blast around you. It's really handy for crowd control and literally slowing things down around you and just reducing the chaos a little bit, especially if you really get it rolling. It only takes 2 dodges to freeze nearby enemies. And once you've frozen enemies, we're talking about including shatter damage as well, which helps your damage even more. There's still a few layers yet though. Slowing your enemies counts as an elemental debuff, of course, and if you'll remember, we have a void aspect that takes advantage of nearly every defeated debuff target. Stylish Executioner will grant invisibility to you anytime you defeat an elemental debuff target, whether that's volatile, suppressed, jolted, severed, or in our case, slowed. It's just mind-blowing to me that we have this aspect on Prismatic because there's so many easy ways to apply debuffs since we're drawing off of 5 subclasses instead of just 1. And that means we get to take advantage of invisibility really often. So at this point, you're dealing massive damage, you're getting health regen with smacking enemies around, but then as you dodge to continue the loop, you're also slowing and freezing targets, and then every time you land a kill, it's going to really help you survive because you're going invisible. Just makes it a lot easier to move from target to target without getting absolutely shredded. And there's still one more thing about Stylish Executioner I don't want you to miss. The second half of the aspect states that your next melee attack while invisible will weaken targets, so it's kind of a free debuff. On top of everything we just mentioned, you now have a debuff. And this right here might be the most incredible thing about Prismatic to me. The flexibility that it provides allows other abilities to shine in a way that's unique and more powerful than ever before. The ability itself isn't technically different, but taking Stylish Executioner as an example, Hunter Void melee usually isn't the play. You don't really want to be that close. I mean, Void Hunter is all about invisibility, escaping, crowd control, that kind of stuff. Closing in for melee just doesn't really fit Void all that well. But now, we're on Prismatic, we have Stylish Executioner, and now we're using a super hybrid Arc and Stasis melee build, and now weakening targets with a melee makes perfect sense. It folds right into our builds, and it enhances it so much more than it ever could on just a Void subclass. And when Prismatic was announced, I think that's kind of the synergy we were all looking for and hoping for, and it's so much fun when it works like this. I've only had time to play my Hunters so far, but I'd love to hear from you guys on Titan and Warlock if you've been seeing these kind of combinations as well. It's genuinely super exciting. Like, there's just so much potential. So everything we've just covered doesn't even include fragments, artifacts, armor mods, and even better yet, the exotic class items coming after the day 1 raid. As of right now, the fragments I'm running are Facet of Courage, Dawn, Protection, Purpose, and Ruin. Courage is going to grant additional damage to your light abilities against darkness debuff targets, which is, you know, kind of the whole point of the build, so that's perfect. Every dodge is going to slow nearby enemies, and it's just another easy way to layer on damage. I was kind of shocked. I was one-shotting enemies I really didn't think I'd be able to in Legend campaign the other day. Facet of Ruin also stacks on a little more damage since it enhances shatter damage we can easily take advantage of just by dodging a few times. And depending on which exotic class perks you run later, this fragment only gets better. We'll get around to that. I also run Facet of Purpose with 2 Reaper mods. Since we're dodging a lot, 2 Reaper mods allows us to get a quick cooldown on our orb generation. Since we're using our dodge so much, it just seemed to make sense to take advantage of that and get some buffs from the orbs that we generate from it. Really, any option here is going to help. You just want something that's going to boost your survivability a little bit, so whether that's Silk Strike and Woven Mail, Tether and Overshields, just pick whatever you prefer. It's tied to your super. Survivability is always a weakness of melee builds just by nature. You're up close to dealing with one target at a time, and it's easy to get tunnel vision and ignore all the snipers cutting you down, so this fragment granting some buffs is really helpful. And if you want to make it easier and just make sure you're picking up all the orbs and elemental buffs around you that you're creating, just make sure to run that with powerful attraction on your cloak so that every time you dodge, it just auto picks up everything nearby. It's a nice touch. And while you're at it, you might as well run hands-on and heavy-handed so that melee kills generate orbs and also generate a little bit more super as well. It just doesn't hurt, and we're using our melee a lot. It just kind of makes sense. Now, one more thing about survivability that might be the most potent thing in this entire build. The artifact is very influential, and many seasons often makes or breaks certain builds. And the first mod I want to draw your attention to is Void Hegemony. Defeating Void weakened targets will grant a small amount of overshield. Almost every target we defeat is going to be weakened because of Stylish Executioner. So on top of all the health regen that we've got and the other fragments we'll discuss momentarily, now we're layering on Void Overshield for free, basically. I mean, that's just absolutely fantastic. There's also Galvanic Armor in the same column, which grants damage resist when amplified. You could easily slot the new Arc Super here, and now the orbs you pick up are going to grant amplified and subsequent damage resist because of Facet of Purpose. There's a lot of options here. Some of it's preference based, so just take a look at the artifact and your own subclass and the supers you want to use and figure out where you want to go from there. Point is, you can really stack on the damage resist and help you survive in close quarter to kind of mitigate the risk of running a melee build. Lastly, for the artifact mod, you've got Shield Crush in the 5th column. That's just going to be another layer. Anytime you've got a Void Overshield, Frost Armor, Woven Mail, your melee is going to deal increased damage. Whichever effect you choose will be happening a lot because of how many orbs you can generate, and now you'll be protected with an Overshield and dealing additional damage while you have it. It's just insane. I mean, you have so many damage buffs going already, and then the artifact is just stacking on top of it. I can't wait to unlock everything. This build is already really solid, and the artifact mods just add another layer of potency. Now, for the rest of the fragments, I got Faceted Protection. It's kind of a no-brainer. It's just going to help you survive with a passive damage buff when surrounded. It's kind of the whole goal of this build. Just jump into the middle of everything and start slapping enemies around. A little bit of resistance there is always a good idea. And lastly, we've got Facet of Dawn. So anytime you melee an enemy, you'll also gain a few seconds of radiance to boost your weapon damage. Not a bad idea if you want to pair it with a 1-2 punch shotgun or something like that. So as great as this build is, and it will get better with exotic class items, I do want to take a sec to talk about its weaknesses. I think it's important to talk about that with builds because I'm not a used car salesman here. It's important to consider the weaknesses with your builds so you don't just run in and get slaughtered thinking that you can just do a Grandmaster or Day 1 raid for free. First off, it's a melee build, and like we've talked about, survivability is an issue. Even while you're slaying out, it's important to take a step back for a second and make sure you're dealing with any longer range targets that might burn you down if you take too long to secure another kill. Health restoration from melee kills is great, but it forces you to be really aggressive, which is fine, but you just gotta make sure to avoid the tunnel vision that can come with that. Still gotta exercise a little bit of caution. Second issue is just how aggressive this build forces you to be. Also, there are some enemies that it just doesn't work against. Tormentors handle melee builds really well. They're just gonna smack you around. Obviously, you have your weapons to compensate for this, but just know that your build specifically isn't gonna help here, unlike some others where you may be able to apply more debuffs safely and help yourself that way. The way that you stay alive with this build is by being aggressive. Your extra health regen comes from punching stuff, and that's just not a fist fight you're gonna win. Third issue is kind of related to enemy type. Sometimes enemies are distant and they're literally just too far away to punch. Sometimes they're really annoying gun bats that suppress you. Seriously, don't let that happen. You get suppressed and slowed down, that's basically a death sentence. Also husks. Husks still release their little flying exploding death worm when you punch them, and that's definitely a problem. Besides that, really any exploding enemy, exploder shanks, cursed thrall, screeds, all that stuff. You might have an intrusive crane eating thought that your melee build is so good that you can get away with punching an explosive target, but it's a lie. Don't do it. Last issue is ad clearing. You can do it, it's just a little slow with this build. Dodge, punch, dodge, punch. It's really effective in a smaller group of tougher targets, but against many little ads, it can get kind of tedious and you'll probably want to just pull your gun. I think we can address this issue a little bit with the exotic cloak, which we'll be able to earn soon. One of the pairings you can do with that cloak I think makes the most sense with the subclass setup, and that's Spirit of the Liar for the increased melee damage, combined with Spirit of Caliban, which grants ignitions on powered melee final blows. This is the exact exotic cloak I will be grinding for this weekend. This combination of extremely powerful melees mixed with ignitions on every powered melee kill is just hilarious and ridiculous to me. I mean, that's the whole build, right? Like, it's non-stop powered melees chained back to back with massive damage and health regen, and now we're factoring in ignitions, which almost completely solves the ad clear issue. I genuinely can't wait to get my hands on this combo and try it in a super ad dense environment like Onslaught or whatever other activities are coming. And while Spirit of the Liar doesn't include the health regen like the full exotic does, that's easily fixed by just running Facet of Blessing instead of Dawn, so our melee final blows are going to start health regen. So at this point, build is in full swing. You'll be dealing massive damage to single targets, slowing and freezing while also going invisible in between kills and weakening nearly every target you strike, generating elemental protective buffs of your choice with Facet of Blessing, staying alive with Facet of Protection, while also creating ignitions with every melee enhanced by Facet of Ruin. It's already a really great build, and I think once you add the ignitions, that's just gonna send it over the edge. As far as exotics go, the ability uptime of this build isn't really an issue at all, so whatever you need to slot for DPS or ad clear or whatever you like to use, just go for it. I really wanted to just focus on the prismatic abilities in this video, so I didn't really make any weapon recommendations, and that's partially because you can just be so flexible with it. The melee on its own is very powerful, and it frees up a lot of options for other kinds of damage. I had a lot of fun with this setup day one. I hope you do as well if you try it. If you do, don't forget to like the video. Feedback is always great, and of course there's going to be a dim link in the description so you can try it out easily for yourself. And if you have any tweaks to my build or prismatic builds of your own that you've been excited to play with, I love reading your comments, so definitely leave one of those. We'll be back with weapon crafting guides, reviews, more builds, so definitely subscribe so you don't miss those. Thanks for watching. Catch you guys next time.